the idea that even though we are alone in this moment by ourselves, we are part of this community of people that really care about growing and healing and recovering from whatever it was that we experienced in our life, and that we believe that we could have something better than what we have in our lives right now. And so we all came here, and I love that. One of the I've talked about this before, but one of the key components of self-compassion and healing is being aware that we're not just alone in suffering, that we are like so many other people around the world. And we're not alone. We're not dealing with this by ourselves, even though it may feel like it sometimes. And I feel like having doing this every week has been a great reminder that there is a whole group of us out there in our different cities around the country and around the world, just trying to say, hey, I'm working on this too. We're all in this together. So let's review some of the exciting places. Wisconsin, Puerto Rico, Maryland, New Hampshire, Minneapolis, Connecticut, Florida. Oh, Vanessa's from Texas. I just spent like 10 days in Texas. South Carolina, the Poconos in Pennsylvania, Melbourne, Florida, Oyster Bay, New York. I spent, like 20 some odd years on Long Island. Samantha's from New York, Chicago. Uh, Again, Diana from Toronto, Canada. Thank you. More Chicago. Oh, but Eddie's now in Venice, Florida. Boca Raton, Rhode Island. Do you know, as a side note, I just spent 3 days in Big Bend, and Big Bend is a national park in Texas, and Big Bend is the size of Rhode Island. Yeah, fascinating. It's a fantastic place. I loved it. It's probably been the best part of my trip across country so far. That was very funny, Diana. Thank you very much for that. Boston, Massachusetts, Buffalo, New York, New Jersey, Colorado, more Maine, Michigan, Columbus, Ohio, more Ontario, Colorado. Excellent. Um, so let's see, we've got maybe a minute up. Maybe I'll just kind of start the wind up a little bit here. So you've already, Montreal. I love Montreal. I've been to Toronto and Montreal in Canada, and I really liked both of those places. Um, uh, we're introducing ourselves, letting us know where you're from. That's awesome. If you have any questions during the workshop, which is absolutely fine, and I love questions, use the Q&A feature on Zoom. So if you don't see that in your Zoom box or your Zoom bar, click on the three dots, and then you'll see a Q&A option. Click on that, and it opens up a little box for you. That way you can follow the questions other people ask, or you can submit your own questions. If you raise your hand or if you put a question in the chat, I'm gonna probably miss it. I can't see the hands raised, anything like that. Slightly annoying, but and so so the chat, I'm gonna have to tune out the chat once I get going, because it's, as you can just see, I just got distracted by it. So I can't really afford to pay attention to that and still do well doing this workshop. And so again, just submit your questions via the Q&A. I promise whatever happens, I'll get to all your questions. If I don't answer them during the workshop, I will get to your questions at the end. I love answering your questions, and I have no qualms in staying late in order to do that. Uh, this workshop should be around 60 minutes. I'm not really sure, to be honest. Um, but it should be around 60 minutes. That's the goal. Again, you can continue to use the chat. We've got a couple people from Colorado, someone from Texas. You're welcome to use the chat while I'm talking, but again, I won't be able to monitor it. So just be kind and courteous and respectful. You always are, but better safe than sorry. And also don't forget, You don't need to worry too much about notes if you don't want to take notes or anything. Just focus on the slides and what I'm saying. I'll send you the link to the recording and the slide deck and other resources that pop up during the workshop. I'll send those to you tomorrow morning. Usually I post them through Meetup announcement. So it's like a mail through Meetup. And then also I'll post it in this workshop's discussion so that you can more easily access it. But if you don't get it by tomorrow afternoon, just reach out to me and I will let you know. I normally don't, oh, look, someone from Delaware. I normally don't preface my workshops with anything except um, this is now the third week of me driving across the country. I'm really feeling the tiredness today. And so I'm going to do my best. Uh, this happens to also be it's a more personal and intense topic for me. So the combination of me being more worn out and this being a more vulnerable issue, um, I don't know. We're going to see how it goes. I'm certainly going to do my best, but if you don't mind granting me a tad bit of patience, I would appreciate it if I get distracted or lost or emotional or whatever it is. Um, so let's get started. So this workshop, as I was saying, it's a different approach than what I've been doing for the past, whatever it is, 7 months or something. It's called Maybe It Wasn't Me, Exploring Why We Feel Shame and What We Can Do About the Shame. This stems from my upcoming memoir, which is called In My Rearview Mirror. Now, this is something I've written. This is about my story of healing and personal growth. And I'm really excited to finally share it with you. I'm hoping to have it. This trip has kind of thrown off my timing a little bit, but I'm hoping to have this for the spring or early summer. Have it published in the spring and early summer. Which reminds me, I forgot to set up a Google form for you to sign up if you want to read the book first. Okay, well, we'll figure that out later on. Um, so that's a good example of where my brain is at. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read an excerpt from my book. It's not very long, but it'll kind of focus on a key moment in the story and then in my story. And then I'll take the rest of the workshop kind of like I would with any of my other workshops, but it'll be more focused on using my story as an example. I think there's real value in I'm hoping there's real value in being able for you to see these things play out in real life, meaning you'll see how it actually affected me and what I was able to do in order to kind of heal and grow from that. And so that's the structure of tonight. I'll do a little reading and then we'll go through the workshop the same way we normally would. And then I'll take any questions and comments and feedback. And obviously, if you have, I probably don't say this enough, particularly for those of you that have been to quite a few of my workshops, which I love. If you have feedback or if you have ideas for other workshops you think might be helpful for people in our community, then please just let me know. I'd love to hear about it. And if you have feedback about how this particular workshop goes, let me know because I have other of these lined up. And so if I can continue to make them better for you, I want to do that. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about me. For those of you who don't know, I'm Jeremy Schneider. I have a master's degree in social work and I have a master's degree in family therapy. I run a company called Build on Your Strengths, and my whole focus is uh, trying to help you develop a mental health portfolio, right? Essentially, I want you to have a whole array of practical tools and skills that you can use whenever you need them, depending upon the situation. So I teach them from a lot of different perspectives and on a lot of different topics. But in an ideal world, the way I hope it comes across to you is that you're like, you got this and you got this and you got this skill, and you're adding it to your portfolio. And then another workshop adds maybe two or three more skills, and you're adding those. And you're just developing this large portfolio so that when we're doing the work on your own healing and growth, you have these things that you can turn to for support and help. And if it's too much, then you also have me that you can turn to as well. I think it's really important to remember that, most of us have dealt with the fact that our past is impacting our present. And the goal for healing and growth is really to be able to manage that better, to realize how our past impacts our present, and be able to then do something about it that helps us today, right? Most of us are just experiencing how our past impacts our present and not able to do anything about it. That the purpose of these workshops and my work in general is really to help change that. I've written a book called Fatherhood in 40-Minute Snapshots, which is also available on Amazon. It's a book I wrote when my kids were younger. My kids have graduated college, but when they were younger, I would write every day about my parenting experiences with them and the things that I was learning. And so if you'd like to take a look at that, please do. I do a series of workshops on a whole number of topics. And I also have a Psychology Today column on artificial intelligence and mental health, that if that's kind of your thing, you might really enjoy that as well. So, oops, sorry. Oh, look at that. Sorry. So again, my book is called The In My Review Mirror. To set the stage, this is from chapter 2. Okay. It's called Fissures in the Facade. And I've just begun in the book, I've just begun to start to remember a little bit of what had happened to me. I hadn't remembered much of it yet. And it was just beginning to see glimpses of what I was actually beginning to deal with. And that's where this comes in. Okay, so this is now me reading from the book. At the time, I still believe my mother had been a pretty good mother when I was growing up, part of the facade my brain had carefully built, but had become someone different after my parents got divorced. To begin to think that this might not be true was frightening. Each new understanding made larger and larger cracks in my facade. In less than a year, I had learned that my parents' marriage had not been good, not a healthy foundation for our family, and that my mother, this supposedly wonderful person, loved by everyone we knew, had extramarital affairs, and on top of all that, she had said she was tired of being a mother before I had even started kindergarten. The ground was shaking so profoundly beneath my feet, it was hard to stay standing. As with many walls, particularly ones built to dam off a river of water or of memories and emotions, once cracks appear, their fall is inevitable. I certainly didn't know at the time that this was the beginning of the end of my facade, but the ever-growing fissures led to others, led to the complete destruction of that wall, and the subsequent reconstruction of myself. One of the most important cracks in my facade came one day while I was sitting in my Psychology 101 class, listening to our professor in my freshman year of college. Someone from the class asked what he would do if parents brought him a child for therapy. Would he see the child alone? No, the professor said. My entire being was focused on whatever he was going to say next. A child is only a product of their parents, he said. My breath caught. Everything else, the room, my classmates, the sound of my own heartbeat, were filtered out of my mind. If the parents are bringing their child in for therapy, my guess is that there's something wrong with what they are doing instead of there being something wrong with the child. I would try to push them to come in as a family and probably be able to squeeze the child out of the process and focus on the parents. He kept talking, but I barely heard him. Holy shit. Children are products of their parents? So when my mother sent me to therapy, it wasn't because something was wrong with me. It was because something was wrong with her. Whoa. His words were like a jackhammer, digging deeper into my facade, jarring and unsettling. No one had ever said anything like that to me. He kept teaching, but that was the last thing I remembered from that class. According to my first therapist, yes, first of many, I was 9 years old and had been incommunicado for some time before my first session. My parents, read my mother, had been concerned enough about it to send me to a therapist. They weren't concerned enough to tell me why they were sending me to a therapist, or maybe I just don't remember. But the subtext always seemed crystal clear to me. I was there because I was doing something wrong. What that was never very clear to me, but I knew. I believed I was doing something wrong, that I was the problem. And so they sent me to therapy to be fixed. And that belief shaped me more than I realized. That wasn't the first time I was told I was the problem, that I needed to be fixed, but it was the first time a third party had to get involved because I was broken so badly. My role in our family was cast pretty early on and reinforced many times. Sadly, even when my parents tried to do something well to help me, despite all they were doing to hurt me, they screwed up, causing me more pain and angst. But, as I like to say, you got to go with your strengths. And in the case of my parents, their strengths, what they were good at, was causing emotional and mental harm. They had learned it from the generations that came before them and were unwittingly doing their level best to pass on that tradition to me. I've had enough therapy to last several lifetimes, so it is possible that I don't really remember my first actual session. But maybe this was the first session where I started to communicate with her. What I remember certainly seems like my first session with Tucker. That's what I called her. I often refer to my therapist by their last name. I never said, I have a session today. I said, I have Tucker. I think it had something to do with ownership, the sense that I was there for them, not for me. I don't remember walking in or meeting her, but I do remember not wanting to talk. I remember the room being very dark, even though I don't believe it was actually dark. I remember not understanding why I was there or who this strange woman was and why she wanted to talk to me. I remember her finally getting me to talk about my best friend's backyard, where he and I played baseball any chance we could get. One of my favorite places as a child because it was one of the few places where I felt good, felt like my true self. Sports were like that for me growing up. Well, except for the constant breaking of bones, of course. It was pretty much the only thing I was good at, the only time when I seemed unaffected by all I had been through and was able to excel, to shine. I started to explain it to her and she asked me to draw it. I certainly wasn't an artist, but I did my best, and that started what I think was our first real conversation. Me explaining where the bushes were, the fence, the houses, etc., so she understood where everything was. My first session was when I was 9 years old, and 9 years old definitely counts as a child, which meant that my being sent to therapy was more a reflection of my parents than of me. I had never even considered the possibility, nor had anyone else in my life, including Tucker. I don't think I ever had the courage to bring this up with her either. All of this time, I had believed it was all my fault, that there was something fundamentally wrong with me, and that was why I kept having to go back to therapy. But in one fell swoop, this professor of psychology was saying that maybe it wasn't me. Maybe the problem all along was my parents. Let's say that one more time together now. Maybe it wasn't me. That is a powerful statement, isn't it? Maybe it wasn't me. After my professor's comments, I was dazed, dizzy, what I later understood to be a state known in psychology as disassociation. I was becoming disconnected from myself in order to avoid what I was experiencing, the jackhammering going on in my brain, in order to avoid the flooding of emotions, because it was all so overwhelming to my system. Okay, I got through that. That was good. So, sorry, give me one more second. My slides are being weird today. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about there, and let me just open something up real quick. Great. Is that there's kind of a three elements to this, right? First is that realization, right? The idea that, wait, maybe it wasn't me, got planted, but I didn't just all of a sudden I wasn't all of a sudden fine, right? I still had a lot of work I needed to do. And it took me a long time to really fully understand what my professor was saying and that it really meant that it wasn't me, that it wasn't my fault. And what we're going to do tonight is really talk about some of the skills that I was able to use to go from that sense of maybe it wasn't me to it definitely wasn't me. It had nothing to do with me. I was essentially a symptom, a result of the problems in my family. I was not the problem in my family. And that's really what I want to talk to you about, right? You probably thought you were the problem, just like I thought I was the problem. But really, you've been the symptom all along. You've been essentially the side effect of this problem that you've been dealing with. You are the result of it. You are not the cause of it. And it's a real strong difference. And I want to walk through that a little bit more detail. How can we know that for sure? We're going to talk about four different ways that'll help you kind of get from that maybe to definitely. The first is to think about identity versus injury, right? Understanding that you're the symptom, not the problem. This is really huge, and I'm going to break this down a little bit more. Then I'm going to cover something called the professor check, which is just three questions that help deal with shame spirals that hopefully you can then use for yourself. We'll talk about the quarantine method for those of you that have been to my cognitive management workshops. Uh, we've talked a little bit about that. And then we're going to talk about the power of repetition and why repetition and saying this over and over and over and over and over and over again is not only important, but necessary to be able to really make progress. So let's talk about identity versus injury. So the thing is, when we're kids and we grow up in a difficult environment, a stressful environment, an adverse environment, a traumatic environment, whatever it happens to be, we often think of ourselves as the source of whatever is wrong. If I was just better, if I was just more perfect, if I was more lovable, if they care, if that could get them to care about me more, whatever it is, right? That is the way, one, that's the way kids think. But two, think about it from another perspective. It's that the reason we start to think that way is kind of twofold. One is because that gives us some sense of control in a situation that we are completely helpless in, right? If I do something more, maybe that will make things better. It gives me some sense that I can maybe make a difference, that I can get them to love me more than they did, whatever it happens to be, right? The other is we can't kind of look at our parents or our caretakers or whatever it is and think that it's their fault. Like they are everything to us, right? They are responsible for us being alive, right? That's food, love, care, all of that. The idea that they're fallible and making mistakes or doing things maliciously, right? Like our brains can't handle that when we're kids. And so we don't even consider that an option. So the best way to think about it is that it has something to do with us. Another component of sort of how shame shows up here is also that shame is handed down through the generations. So the people that have been hurt before us, who then have hurt us, also received shame and they have passed down that shame to us. There's even some research that talks about shame being like added to our genetics. I mean, it's crazy. And so we really need to kind of factor that in as well, that if we come from a family history of adverse conditions or trauma, whatever it is, that there's probably already some shame that we inherited essentially. Not to mention the fact that we were then kind of taught to think of ourselves as the problem in terms of, and that's kind of what shame comes from. So I really want to help you understand shame, and I'm considering doing another workshop on shame in a couple of months and kind of coming at it from a different perspective. But what I want you to think about are kind of two things that I really want to get across first. One, shame is very different than most other emotions that we experience. I think sometimes people confuse shame and guilt. And when you think about like guilt is like, oh, I did something wrong, right? Or I made a mistake and I feel really badly about it. Shame is, I made a mistake. There is something fundamentally wrong with me, right? Shame is a statement about you as a human being, as an entity, not a characteristic you might have. Um, I'm sorry, I don't know if you've noticed like I keep moving up and down on my screen and it's really distracting. So I apologize for that. It's just another pleasant quirk for the evening. And so right, we learn like the way we think about shame is that it's related to our identity. It's not a characteristics we have. It's not something that we do. Shame is about who we are as a human being, right? For a long, long time. I mean, up until the last 10 years or so, maybe, I was sure that I was emotionally handicapped. I just believed I wasn't like other people and I would never be like other people and I wasn't going to be able to do the things that maybe other people could because of these limitations in the way that emotions impacted me. I didn't understand that for the longest time. That's shame. I may have difficulty with emotions and I may have intense emotions and sure there's lots of stuff there, but a real inability to handle emotions, the fact that I am limited because I of the way that I feel, that's a statement about who I am. I am not as good as other people. That is shame. I just didn't know that for a very long time, decades. So that's one way of kind of understanding it. Another is that shame the way I think about it is it like mimics your own voice. So you'll hear like right. I was convinced I was emotionally handicapped, and not only was I convinced, I had accepted it. I was like, this is just the way that I have to live my life. I have to be okay with this. This is a problem that I have with the way that I am, and it's going to limit my life, and that's the way I'm going to deal with it. It sounded like my voice. It sounded like the voice in my head. It sounded like me. It wasn't. It was shame. I don't think that anymore. I haven't necessarily changed all that dramatically. It's just that I'm more understanding about the role that shame plays in my life, and I'm able to counter it much more effectively. It's obviously a lot easier to counter shame when you can see it's there. It was quite hard to counter shame when I didn't realize it. Um, so I think that's one of the other kind of tricks of shame is the way that it mimics our voice. So kind of the what we want to do tonight, and again, we're not going to, this is like that moment in the psychology class, right? We're not going to change whether or not you feel shame anymore, but we're going to help you begin to notice, wait a second, maybe what you're feeling is actually shame and not something real. So you have this thought of something is wrong with me, right? The problem is I can't handle emotions or I'm not emotionally capable enough to function in the world, whatever it may be for you, right? You're not good enough or you're not lovable or whatever the thing that you say to yourself is, right? And then we're going to translate that into what the actual truth is, which is that was wrong with what happened to you. There's actually nothing wrong with you. You are totally fine. And but what you went through was wrong. What you went through was difficult and challenging, and it may have taken a toll on you, but it is not your fault, and it didn't happen because of who you are as a person. So back in the 90s, I think there's this great movie called Pump Up the Volume with Christian Slater. I love this movie. I love this movie so much. And this line is maybe one of the best lines ever, and it's certainly the best line about shame. And even though I got it when I was younger, I didn't understand it was about shame. I just knew it was about me. And so feeling screwed up in a screwed up place, in a screwed up time, does not mean that you are screwed up. Going through crap when you're growing up in childhood doesn't mean that you're crap. It means you went through a crappy experience, and that sucks. It does. But it's not a statement about you. It's just a statement about what you went through. So I love this quote. I also love Christian Slater. So what I want you to do is think about one of these kind of, I think about them sometimes as like core beliefs, right? These kind of shame beliefs that you might have that say something about what is wrong with you or why you're not good enough or whatever it is, right? I want you to take that, and then we're going to go through four different examples, and then I want you to do that for yourself. Whatever your sentence is, whatever your belief is, try and reframe it the way that we're reframing these other ones. So one is I'm too anxious. And so a good response to this is simply that like, you spend your entire life with your nervous system being overwhelmed and that you had to stay on high alert so that now your nervous system is on high alert all the time. That's not a fundamental flaw. That's a survival mechanism. It's just a survival mechanism you don't need anymore. But that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It means that what you went through was too difficult and too painful and too challenging to deal with. And you had to live in a way that made yourself constantly on guard. It makes perfect sense. I say this as if it's a simple thing, but right now, part of your goal in life is to help you realize, help your nervous system understand that now you're okay. Now you're safe. Now it doesn't need to be on high alert anymore. It did, but not now. I'm too needy. This is one that a lot of people have, right? Well, when your emotional needs aren't met as a kid, you're going to be really hyper aware of them to see if they're being met now. That makes perfect sense. It's if you had been starved from food for most of your life, you're going to be constantly thinking about when you're going to get your next meal. And are you going to get your next meal? And will it be enough? It's the same thing. You were emotionally starved. Except now that you think that that's what's wrong with you, when in reality, that makes perfect sense. You were emotionally starved. You are hungry for emotions. Nothing wrong with it. I can't trust people. Well, if you grow up in an environment where your trust is violated, where you're taken advantage of, or you're just left vulnerable, then yeah, you're going to learn that you can't trust other people. Again, that's not a fundamental flaw in who you are. That's a reaction to the environment in which you grew up, right? Feeling screwed up in a screwed up place in a screwed up time does not mean that you're screwed up. That's why I love it so much because it's perfect. I'm too sensitive, right? Well, yeah, I mean, you had to be hyper attuned to other people's emotions, particularly if that emotion could be threatening, because it was all about survival. You had to get through it. So you learned the skill of being emotionally attuned, which is too sensitive, right? I want you to try and do this for yourself. Take 2 minutes, write out whatever your thing is, or just think it, whatever your kind of belief is about shame, about not being enough. And how would we rephrase that? And if you are having trouble rephrasing that and you're comfortable doing this, put it in the Q&A and we'll do it together. And if we don't do it now, we'll do it at the end. I'm totally fine with that. So take a moment, do that. If you want to add it to the Q&A and discuss it together and get my feedback, happy to provide it. So let's take a look at the professor check as I just did a time check and I'm probably moving a little too slowly. So I'll try to speed this up a little bit more. The professor check really focuses on the same kind of thing, but it's like when that shame spiral starts, what can you do about it? Right? When you start to hear those shame thoughts in your head, you're too much, you're the problem, I'm not good enough, I'm emotionally handicapped, I something is wrong with me, right? When you start to have those, we need to um, we need to really kind of address them right away, right? The thing about shame is that it doesn't survive really well in the light. It thrives in the dark. It's really, really good in the dark. And what we want to do is help bring it to light and maybe apply a bit of logic to it and watch it just crumble. Okay, so two people posted a couple of thoughts and I just want to get to them. So Karen said, I feel less than, like I'm not enough, I'm overbearing or too much. Now, for people that have been through difficult childhoods, that is actually quite common. I have certainly felt that way much of my life. The reality is that you feel that way because the people in your life weren't there for you, right? The primary caretakers in your life weren't meeting your needs. So you interpreted their not being able to meet your needs as a failure on your part for wanting too much or being too intense or overwhelming or whatever it is. But it all started because people weren't there for you. And that's not a flaw in you. That's a flaw in the way that you were raised. And I'm not saying the caretakers in your life are like malicious, horrible people. They just may not have been able to do it because of their own stuff, right? We don't hurt people become parents, and it doesn't make them healthy all of a sudden, right? So they still do things that hurt other people because they're still hurt. Doesn't mean it's intentional or malicious or anything like that. So I think one way of phrasing that is I actually never got what I needed. And so now I feel like what I need is too much. But maybe what you need is just right. And it's a matter of finding people in your life who are better able to do that. Okay, I hope that helps, Karen. Someone else wrote in, I am too broken to heal. This is like this always breaks my heart. You, you've just never been broken. You've been hurt. You've been hurt so much, but you didn't break. You're not broken. You weren't born broken. This didn't break you. You're still here. And frankly, you're still here in a workshop that you're trying to help yourself. And you had the courage to say that, even though you did it anonymously, which is totally fine. You had the courage to bring that up in the whole group so that I could talk about it. That's not broken. That's not weakness. So whoever did that, I'm just reminding you, you're not broken. You are deeply hurt, probably for very good reasons. And it's hard to imagine that you'll be able to get from this point to a point where you feel better, but you will. If for no other reason than because you're already taking those steps. And that's more than a lot of people ever can do. So I hope that helps you kind of reframe that as well. Again, if you have other questions, so Jonathan, give me a moment. I'm gonna do a little bit more of the professor check and then we'll come back to the questions, but I don't want you to feel like I'm ignoring you. I'm just starting to worry about time a little bit. So with the professor check, think about this in terms of three questions, right? So when you start to have shame thoughts or shame spirals in your mind, you can ask these three simple questions. Who decided this? What's the actual evidence? And would I say this to someone I love? So who decided this? The About me being the problem, for instance, when I was a kid, right? That I didn't decide that. Someone decided that for me. My parents essentially decided that. My therapist kind of decided that, right? Like they're the ones that sort of made that into a thing. I learned that from them. I didn't wake up and decide that. I learned it from them. So I didn't decide this. That was them. What's the actual evidence? Well, there isn't really any evidence about me being the problem. I'll get to that in a second. I'm going to walk through this more clearly. And would I say this to someone I love? Like, would I say this to my kids that you're the problem? I would never say that to my kids. I would never say that to anyone that I cared about. Even if I thought they did something wrong, I would never say you're the problem. I would say, can we talk about this behavior that you just did that hurt me? But that's very different than you're the problem. So let's kind of break this down a little bit more, right? So I was the problem and needed to be fixed. Who decided this? That was my parents, the therapist, whoever, right? That wasn't me. I learned it. That's a learned behavior. That's what shame often is. Shame is a learned something from other people. What's the evidence? Well, I mean, the evidence, I was 9 years old, so the likelihood of me being the problem is pretty slim right off the bat. Uh, I started learning that when I was younger, so even younger, it makes me less of the likely to be the problem. Clearly, there was something going on in my family, and I was reacting to that. So again, that whole I'm going to keep saying this as many times as I can. Feeling screwed up in a screwed up place in a screwed up time does not mean that I was screwed up. It just means I was in a screwed up place in a screwed up time. And I felt screwed up. So that wasn't, there wasn't evidence that there was something wrong with me. There was evidence that pointed to the fact that the situation I was in was not healthy and was not good and was causing problems. And then would I say this to a 9 year old that they were the problem? I wouldn't tell that to any 9 year old, let alone a 9 year old that I cared about. Right. So, when you start kind of going through these questions, the shame logic doesn't really hold up. And I want to kind of give you some of those tools to be able to do that. So again, I want you to think about this for yourself. I'm gonna send this to you tomorrow. So you can do this on your own. In the interest of time, I'm just gonna move a bit more quickly because I also want to get to Jonathan's question. And also, if anyone else has questions, I want to make sure there's time for those too. The quarantine method. So I talk about cognitive management. I have a whole workshop on cognitive management, and then the idea there is kind of like everything in our brain is like a mental marketplace, and everybody is just trying to sell you thoughts. And what we don't remember enough is we just buy thoughts. It's just like, oh, that's a thought. It must be true. It's like that. No, thoughts are not true. Thoughts are not facts. They're not real. They're just thoughts. They're neurons firing in our brain that happen to convert into a language we understand, right? Like it's just it's it's just thoughts. There's nothing factual about them. There's no truth or gospel in our thoughts. I know that sounds weird. It's true. And so um, when you think about that, then we start to be more discerning about, well, what are the thoughts that we actually going to buy? How do we buy thoughts? We buy them with our attention. Do we pay attention to that? No. Is that worth paying it? Is that worth our time? No, it's not. So a kind of a fun, simple way of thinking about that is quarantine it. Like it's a junk mail, right? That you get in your email inbox, right? You read it, you're just like, oh, that's junk mail. I'm tossing that aside. You don't like try to understand it. You don't try to figure out where it's coming from. You're just like, oh, that's junk. And you move it to spam and you block the sender, right? So That's kind of like the key here, right? We don't want to open it up and carefully read every word. We don't want to analyze why it exists or what it might mean about us, right? Like the fact that I get spam is just because I have an email address, right? Like I get spam texts. That has nothing to do with me. I have a phone number. Basically, that's how it works these days, right? So, and I don't try to understand the spam text and what it means or what it says about me. It's just like, report junk, right? That's kind of what we want to learn to do with our own junk thoughts, right? Our shame thoughts that are just junk, right? So I'm too much. That's a junk thought. Just put it in the quarantine folder. Don't worry about it again. Something's wrong with me. I always mess things up, right? Same thing. Junk folder. Like we don't need to take these thoughts as seriously as we have in the past because one, we understand that thoughts are not facts. There's nothing true about it. There's nothing real about it. Secondly, we know that shame is not real. We know shame sounds like our voice, but it's not our voice. And three, we don't have to engage with any of our thoughts. We can just choose to not pay attention to them. And certain thoughts are easy to not pay attention to. We want to help shame thoughts kind of get to the place where you're just like, oh, that's a shame thought. Quarantine, right? I'm not saying this is simple. It's going to take practice, a lot of practice, but it can absolutely be done and it gets easier. So just real quick walking through this, right? A shame thought appears. I'm a burden to everyone. What we would do in the past, maybe we spiral into anxiety. Maybe we don't reach out to friends because we feel like too much of a burden. Or maybe we try to overdo too much. We try to please our friends so much that it's like awkward and weird because we're trying to prove our worth to them. We'll apologize for existing. We'll ruminate for hours, right? We want to kind of see if we can avoid a lot of that. Instead, we want to be like, oh, that's a junk thought. That's not real. I'm moving that into the quarantine folder and I'm not going to worry about it. And then I'm going to go about the rest of my day and I'm going to still reach out to friends. I'm still going to take care of myself. I'm going to still use self-compassion. I'm going to do the things that really help me heal and grow. So I want you to be able to do the same thing. Again, once you learn your kind of key shame thoughts and once you can recognize them, right, you can use the professor check if you want. But that takes a little bit more time. With this, if you're like heading into a meeting or you're just like in the middle of doing something else and you have this kind of thought, you don't have to break it down into those three questions if you don't want to, or if you don't have time to. You can just put it into quarantine and just not give it the attention that it wants. And then I really want to take a little bit of time and talk about the importance of repetition. The things our brains remain maintain the ability to change throughout our entire life, right? It's called neuroplasticity. And literally, the way that our brain processes information continues to shift and adjust over time. And what's great about that is that even at my advanced age, we can still be making changes. I can still be changing the way I think. It just takes repetition. And what I mean by repetition is obviously I mean doing it something over and over and over again, but also doing it in similar ways. I'm sorry, the way that my face keeps moving up and down on the screen is so frustrating. And there's nothing I can do to change that. I apologize. Uh, so the way that our brains change, right, is based on us creating these new pathways. And the way I kind of think about it, and I haven't been able to figure out a great way to do this, but like in suburban areas where there's two intersections of sidewalks, but they have like a grass yard in between, and people are too lazy to go to the end and cross over, and they'll cut across the yard, right? And in the beginning, that pathway will be almost invisible. You won't be able to see it. But after a while, as more people step on it and step on it and step on it, right? Like what happens, right? That the grass starts to get matted down, it starts to get a little bit clearer that there's a path there, and then more people follow it. And then before you know it, it's basically a dirt path that's been created. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with our brains, right? When we first create these new pathways of thinking, like, oh, that's a shame thought, that's junk, let's move it to the side. It's like walking on a lawn and we barely even notice we're there. But the more we keep doing that, the more we're creating a new pathway for our brain to process that type of information. But it only happens really well with repetition. And so, what are the ways that we can kind of begin to do that, right? The challenge is, right, first off, it's just changing our brain is not that simple. Second of all, we've had years, if not decades, of having these shameful thoughts. And so essentially, we have layers and layers and layers of shameful thoughts and shameful thoughts around behaviors when we were younger, shameful thoughts around what people have said to us over time and how that's been reinforced, right? Shame that we've inherited without even having any awareness of that whatsoever. Just the challenges that we've been through, shame has been layered on us for so long. It it just doesn't go away like that, right? The first step is really that awareness of, oh, that is a shame thought. Let's do something about that, right? But sometimes just even having that first awareness of like, my professor saying, a child is just a product of their parents, right? Like that was huge moment. It still took me a long time to get to deal with the layers of shame, in part because I still didn't recognize it. But once I did, it became a lot easier to be able to deal with. So, what I recommend is kind of like 30 days of practicing. You don't have to do all of the practicing, you don't have to do everything, but what you want to do is remind yourself several times a day to do these things or to think things, particularly about like, so one of the things that I did, I this is a thing I do all the time. Anytime I want to help myself remember something, I create a calendar appointment and then I set a reminder and then I have it go off every day at the same time. So, um, like I have one that involves shame. That's like, this is not my shame, it's theirs. And it just reminds me that like, it's not my shame, it's their shame. Like this is, I just need to be reminded of that every day. And at this point, I don't see it every day, but I see it multiple times a week, and it's always a good reminder. And so I don't know if you want to write something by your, and leave it by your bed so you see it first thing in the morning, whatever it is. And it can be whatever phrase you want. Like so here I've written, I'm not the problem, I'm the symptom. The problem is what happened to me. It could be feeling screwed up in a screwed up place in a screwed up time does not make me screwed up, right? It can be the kind of a more positive way of like, now I'm safe. Now I'm okay. Now I don't have to worry about that, right? That just that reminder, whatever works for you, that's what I want you to do, right? But you want to do it every day. You want to try and do something like the daily professor check every day or some sort of quarantine every day. You just want to try and practice as much as you can. And then again, you really want to be thinking about one, like heightening your self-awareness so that you can catch the shameful thoughts more quickly before they get too layered inside. And then you want to practice these things. And then you want to do self-compassion. The reason it's 30 days again is just like what I was talking about, right? It's the repetition. So it's the repetition that helps create the pathways, and it's the consistency, and that you're just building this practice so that it becomes second nature to you. And then you're not going to get a workshop from me without some mention of self-compassion, right? That would just be awkward, I think, for all of us. So, remember, you're not fixing yourself, right? You're healing. from a really difficult situation that you experienced. And you're not going to be able to be perfect while you're working on this, right? You're just not going to be able to do it every day. You're not going to remember every day. You're going to get stuck in shame spirals and all of that stuff. Like it's still going to happen, right? It's okay. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I still struggle with shame. Like it still pops up. The goal is not perfection. The goal is just is healing and growth and to be able to more quickly catch these things so that they don't infect our life for too long, right? So, when you forget to do your practice, don't be like, "Oh, I'm such a," just be like, "Okay, I'm gonna start again right now and I'll try it again tomorrow and then we'll see what happens." You just, right? Like this is a healing process. So you want to be kind to yourself because that's going to help you heal, right? If you're hard on yourself, it it's not healing anymore. It's punishment. And you don't deserve that. You've dealt with enough already. So just as a reminder, right? You were never the problem. You were never broken. You were never what was wrong. You were in an environment where things were wrong, where things were broken, and you were impacted by that. And hopefully these tools will be able to help you. So as I mentioned, in my review mirror is my memoir that's coming up. I will include, if I remember, a link to a Google form if you would like to sign up to get notified when the book is published. I hope you will. I hope this hasn't turned you off of it. And I will share more as it's going on. I'm going to do these kinds of workshops once a month. The third Thursday of every month is, I think, what my plan is right now. So yeah, I hope I will see you again at these. If you liked my workshop, please take a moment to rate and review it. Again, if you have ideas for workshops or suggestions on how I can make them better, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to. This is a labor of love, as they say. I want to get these. I want to keep making these better. I want to keep improving these. Um, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the Q&A, and I will be coming to that in a moment, particularly Jonathan and Noel. I will be getting to those in just a couple of minutes. I want to tell you about a couple of things. Again, if you raise your hand, I can't like really call on that. So just put your question in the Q&A, please. So next week's workshop is more of like what I'm calling the integration circle. And it's more of like a special group that we're coming together for. And it's going to really look at the tools that we've covered over the last few weeks in terms of the workshops that I've done, but also any past workshop you want to talk about, you're welcome to come in. And we're going to sit and we're going to talk and we're going to really apply them to yourself in a more deeper way. So this is kind of what I think of as the in-between of, hey, I really like these workshops. I feel like I'm getting something out of it. I'm not quite ready for full coaching, but I do want a little bit more support. This is your time, right? I'm we're gonna do this next week. It's the first one. I'm really excited. I've got a good group of people that have already signed up. I'm charging $7. You can see all my other workshops are free. It's the only one that I charge. And that's because I really want a small group. Today maybe 75, 80 people showed up. I don't want that many people. That's a lot, right? So charging $7 kind of weeds out people a little bit more and also makes the group really focused on the people that want to grow and do more healing work, because that's what we're really going to focus on. In February, I start a whole new round. So there's going to be ways to manage your nervous system, particularly when it comes to fight or flight mode. I'm going to do emotional time travel, and then the The In My Rearview Mirror workshop for next month is going to be about the pool of pain, which I'm really excited about. I haven't really done a workshop on that, but that's a theory I've been working on since I was in my mid 20s. So that should be a lot of fun. I do workshops for organizations. So if you work at a place where you think this would be helpful, please connect me to your HR folks or your leadership team, and hopefully I can be able to come in and support your organization as well. There are a couple other ways that you can connect with me. So I have a Facebook group. I also have a Facebook page that you can follow. I publish articles on LinkedIn and Substack. I have three mental health guides, one on self-care, one on kind of self-awareness, and one on kind of a no pressure guide to mindfulness meditation. And so those are free. So you're welcome to just collect those if you'd like. And then if you're considering coaching, but not really sure if you want to do that or not, I offer a free clarity call. It's 30 minutes. It's basically like a mini session. You come, you sit with me, or we'll do it virtually. We'll sit together, we'll talk a little bit. You'll tell me what's going on if you want, or you can just ask me questions about this process. But often what I find is people just like talk about what's wrong. I talk to them about kind of my suggestions, give them some ideas about what we might work on if that's what they want to do. And then I end the call, like we end the call, and you don't have to schedule. At the end of the call, I'll send you an email that basically says, here's the coaching agreement. If you're interested, here's how you schedule with me. And that's that. And if you don't want to do that yet, that's fine. But I will not pressure you into scheduling while we're on the clarity call. I won't do that. So you'll have a chance to think about it and consider it and get back to me. So I have something called a strength studio, which is where a lot of my content is, my previous workshops, workbooks that I have, such as dealing with scripts, the art of sleep, and the self-care workbook. There are also a bunch of older workshops that I've done over the last few months that are all available. For January, there's a discount code called just Care for Me because that's what I want. I want you to care for you. And so it'll give you 25% off anything that you want there. And then obviously I do individual coaching. If you'd like to do that, it's really focused on kind of whatever you need, whatever you are trying to deal with. We'll figure out how to focus on that the best way and then get you moving as quickly as we can. My aim isn't to do coaching for months and months and years. It's just not, I don't think it's usually necessary. But it will take some time to get things moving. And then that's it. That's it. So let me get to some questions. Again, if you have other questions, um, let me know. Post them in the Q&A, please. So Jonathan says, I worry that people who haven't had a difficult child won't be able to relate to me and will see me as broken. I mean, that's a good statement there, Jonathan. And um, so let's think about that for a moment. I think for those of us that have been through a difficult childhood, particularly if we have done any work on that, there is a level of depth that we might have that maybe some people who haven't gone through as difficult experiences, they might not have that same depth. I don't know if they'll see you as broken. I think that's shame speaking, right? I think that's the voice of shame, right? But I do understand what you're saying about, whether or not someone who hasn't had that kind of experience can really relate to you. And I don't think it's that it's you. And that's where I guess the shame part comes in, right? There's just, you've had to deal with more than some people have. And you've had to look at yourself in a way that some people just have never had to do. Those people might not be as familiar or as comfortable with someone who has done the kind of work that you have. But that's not a statement about what's wrong with you. That's more of a statement of just like the growth that you've had versus maybe the growth that they haven't had yet. The part about seeing you as broken, I think that's definitely shame. And I think that's really just where you can kind of, if you can just quarantine that, just put that aside. It's like, yeah, I'm not broken. Um, but also, work through the professor check, those three questions, right? Like you're not broken. There's nothing about you that's broken. There's really no evidence to support that. It doesn't matter what you've been through, you're just not broken, you know? So that's something to kind of think about. But I think that the depth part of your question about you possibly having more substance than people who haven't done the work, I think is true. I think that feels like it reinforces the shame idea, but I don't think it is related to shame. I think it's just a reality that for those of us that have done more work, it's a little bit harder for people who haven't done that kind of personal growth to relate to us. I consider that a filtering out process. That's probably not someone I want to be with because they're not going to understand me on a level that I want to be connected on. I hope that makes sense. Noel says, I didn't have any trouble at home growing up, but I didn't manage to develop thoughts that I wasn't good enough, smart enough, cool enough. It still carries over today. I also have ADD, so that added to my shame. Does ADD add to shame, anxiety, and sadness? So, I mean, ADD is like a complex variable that seems to make so many emotional things more difficult and challenging. So, um, I mean, let's just say yes, Noel, that ADD does add, because it's essentially like this other layer of challenge and complexity. Um, and it's hard to quantify, I think. Um, and so, Noel brings up a good point. There are definitely situations, and I'm not an expert on this by any stretch of the imagination. I preface that. But there are situations where, there are like some of these kind of negative thoughts that we have are chemical based, which is why medication can make a difference, right? And I'm not preaching medication per se, but like antidepressant medication, anti-anxiety medication, they do change the chemical makeup of our brains, which then sometimes can cause us to have less negative thoughts, which is really helpful and nice. So it doesn't, maybe I need to think about that a little bit more, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like you had this horrific childhood, but more of that, maybe you just have some challenging chemicals in your brain that make things a little bit more difficult for you. I hope that answered your question, Noel. Oh, so someone said, oh, okay, that's interesting. So sorry. So someone said that what Jonathan asked would be a great topic for a future workshop, sort of that uh, the concern about people relating to us because we've done this healing and growth work and they haven't. Okay, let's think about that. Brenda asks, how do I identify shame when shame has become the norm? A person may be operating out of shame but may not realize it because they aren't even able to identify it. I mean, Brenda, ding 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 ding, like that is exactly the problem, right? I operated from that place for decades. And I believed it was me and I believed that it was the way, like that was my brain, that's what I was thinking, and I didn't understand that it was just shame the whole time. And I think it happens. Like I have a client, right? One of my clients that I'm working with right now is we're having a whole series of conversations about shame. And for them, the idea that it's not real, that it's just shame is mind blowing because it's become the norm for them. And of course it has, right? That's the way we were taught. That's the way we were raised. And it's the way we've been thinking for so long. it's again, like I say, like it mimics our voice. That sounds like our voice. Like that's our voice. Like, of course it's our voice. That's got to be real. So part of that, I think, Brenda, is thinking about one, it's the developing awareness of being able to hear our thoughts, right? Just being able to hear our thoughts will help. But then it's beginning to be discerning about our thoughts, right? There's a certain acceptance that we have with our thoughts. Oh, that's a thought, must be real. It must be true. I've got to believe it, right? When we get to a place where we have a slightly bit of a distance, where we're able to label our thoughts. This is why something like mindfulness meditation is so valuable. It helps us learn to label our thoughts and our feelings. And when we label them, we create a little bit of distance. And when we create a little bit of distance, we can look at it with a little bit more of a discerning quality than we can when it's just like it feels like it's us, right? So I'll give you an example. I was reading Jonathan's question about a difficult childhood won't be able to relate to me and will see me as broken. And I had to replay it in my head again because I could feel the confusion between what was real and what was shame. And I couldn't quite identify it at first. And I had to read it over again in my head and I had to think it through. And that's where I got to write the as broken, that they'll see me as broken. Part of that was very obviously shame because there are keywords, Brenda, that I think are really helpful. When you say the words broken, right? That's shame. Like we just, if we can start to learn some of the key words, so to speak, that shame uses, that will really help, right? Broken. That's probably a shame thought. We can just put that aside and not even give it the light of day, like not even pay attention to it. But won't be able to relate to me has this feeling of shame to it, right? But what I think is, and I tried to explain this, and I don't know if I did it well enough, is that yes, the sense that it means something about me that they can't relate to me, that's a shame thought. But there may also be something true to that in the sense that because of the work that I've done, or Jonathan has done, and the growth that he's had, that it may be difficult to relate to them. But that's not shame. That just seems like it reinforces the shame thoughts. I hope that made sense. So, getting back to your question, Brenda, one, I really think the reason I wanted you to kind of think about what your shame thoughts are is because then you can start to think about the keywords that it uses, right? So, like broken, not enough, right? Like anytime you're thinking not enough, that you're not good enough, smart enough, whatever it is, that's probably shame related. We want to be able to identify these keywords that help us say, oh, wait, that's a shame keyword. I probably don't need to really pay much attention to this. So it's awareness, it's that slight distance, being able to label our thoughts so we can look at them more analytically, more as an evaluation, and listening to those keywords and being able to know, oh, that's a keyword of shame. Okay, great. Again, in a couple months when I do this other shame workshop that'll be much more focused on shame. I'm hoping I'll get more in depth into this and you can maybe help me out with it, Brenda. So Jay said, okay, so Jay is just asking, if it's being recorded. It is being recorded, and oh, cheapers. It is being recorded, and I will share the link tomorrow via Meetup. Okay. Again, for those of you that don't, who haven't been on the workshop before, Um, what I usually do is I send it through Meetups email, which I honestly don't know how that appears to you. And I post it in the event discussion group with the link and everything so that you can easily access it there. That's where I would look. I would look there tomorrow. Um, someone at Penny asked, is fear, failure, shame? Okay, Penny, you got me thinking. Is fear, failure, shame? I don't think so. I want to say that fear of failure is a number of things. I think one, fear of failure is also fear of success. I think for those of us that have been through difficult childhoods, sometimes standing out, calling attention to ourselves was risky and maybe felt really dangerous. And so fear of success is kind of like that. Like, what if I get noticed? What if I draw attention to myself and I get hurt? So there's that piece. Fear of failure is also, I think, connected to that idea that, and I guess maybe this is what you're saying about shame. It's connected to the idea that, right, because failure isn't bad, right? I mean, I've made mistakes in this. I mean, hopefully it's not considered an entire failure, but like I've had better workshops than this. I think this is I've struggled a bit, right? Technical issues, etc. The thing about failure is that when we think failure is just like we make a mistake and then we get up and we keep going, there's nothing a big deal about that. When we think of failure as a statement about who we are as a human, right, which is where I think you're asking, does it connect to shame? That's where it's a problem. But that's because we already have shame that there's something wrong with us, and failure reinforces that concept. So I hope that makes sense. I think failure is harder for people who've already been through difficult experiences because if they already have shameful thoughts about there being something wrong with them, then making a mistake, failing, whatever it is, essentially reinforces their belief that there's something fundamentally wrong with them. When obviously it's just a mistake and we all make mistakes. That's a very human thing to do. I hope that answered your question, Penny. I'm not convinced that it did, but I tried. Uh, Deanna asks, how can we find the information if we're interested in doing coaching sessions, particularly the 6 sessions? Is it on Meetup? Do we have a discovery call first? Thanks. Deanna, thank you for your interest. We could do really any way that you want to do it. My suggestion is schedule a clarity call. I would feel more comfortable if we spent 30 minutes together. You can give me a sense of, you can get a sense of what it's like to work with me. Hopefully, you'll like me. And then we can work out the details from there and figure everything out. But so I would schedule the 30-minute clarity call. Again, I'll send you the slide deck tomorrow, and I'll send you the link. If you want to scan the QR code, you'll get the link now, and you can just schedule. But if you don't, then I'll send you the link tomorrow. But I would love to meet you. I would say just schedule the free clarity call. Again, there's no pressure. I won't even make you schedule or anything at that call. So there's no there's no downside except 30 minutes with me, which hopefully is at least somewhat entertaining for you. Um, and Jay says, where we I'm just going to read this to myself first. I mean, I think what Jay is saying is even when we know that we are not the problem, life can be difficult, life can be challenging, life throws all sorts of things at us. It's more difficult when we have this underlying current of shame or that fear of failure, that sense of not being good enough, because every challenge feels like it's saying, "Ha, see, you're not good enough." And that's not true, but that's how we experience it. And so it's kind of going back to the way that you tackle shame, but the way you tackle any of these kind of negative thought processes, it always starts with self-awareness. You combine that with self-compassion, and you do a lot of building up of your sense of awareness, being able to recognize these thoughts and what they mean, and then how to combat them. That is really hard to do in a workshop. That's the kind of stuff that we do during sessions. Uh, Someone asked that suggested an idea, self-trust through life and people who think they're better. I'm afraid I'm not sure I understand what that means. I apologize. If you want to follow up, go ahead. Um, if there are any other questions, please feel free, or if you feel like I missed a question, I'm just double checking now. So if there are any other questions, go ahead. Otherwise, I think that wraps us up for this evening. Thank you all for showing up. And um, yeah, so Jay, I'll be sending the link and everything tomorrow, not tonight. Right. I'm glad you're on a roll, Jay. I am going to get some sleep and I'll send it to you tomorrow morning. Um, So thank you for being patient with me. And I really hope you'll think of at the very least think about signing up for next week's. Uh, it's kind of like a support group is kind of how I think about it, or the integration circle. I really hope you'll take some time to really look at that. Otherwise, hopefully I will see you, if not next week, then 2 weeks when I start the regular workshops again in February. Okay. Next week, just so you know, I will be done with driving across this country of ours, and I will have landed in or arrived in Oakland, which is where I'll be for a few months. So just in case you were really curious. Okay. Thank you very much. Again, I appreciate your time. It was great to see you all, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Okay. Have a great weekend.